And here we go. Indeed, the Real Fellas Talking Sports begins right now. Hey, fellas, how's it going?
Hey, it's going great. I like the music, man. You've upgraded the music a little bit. It sounds pretty cool now.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. And that is Larry Abels. I'm David Burnett and Chuck Snowden. How you doing?
I'm doing wonderful, David. And I did love the new intro and the new music to the intro. So kudos. Great job, my friend. Great job.
No problem at all. We are missing one of our fellas, Earl Rush. Hopefully he'll join us later. If not, we will proceed on anyway. I tell you, it is hard to think about sports without football. I know there's another brand of football that's going on, and we're not going to talk about them at this time. Not ready to, and I think we probably won't even in the coming weeks. But anyway, what we did see this past weekend was the NBA All-Star Weekend. I got to tell you, I didn't watch 1 second of the actual game. I did see the contest, but I can't watch the game. But gentlemen, I'll start with you, Larry. You are a basketball expert. Did you see the game at all?
Yeah, I saw some of the game. It doesn't really hold your interest because it's really not much of a basketball game other than, sort of like a slam dunk fest early on, but I watched it. Turned on, I thought the fourth quarter, my plan was to turn it on in the fourth quarter because I thought it would be very competitive. But when I turned it on, Jonathan's team was up so much. It really was lackluster then too. So I don't feel good about the All-Star game in basketball.
Chuck, your thoughts about the game itself, and then we'll get and kind of break down some of the rest of the weekend and what the weekend actually means. Did you see the game?
Well, I saw some of it. I'm like Larry, I saw some of it. Not to take us off too far, I went to a high school basketball game that night. Paul VI, which is the number 1 ranked high school team in the country, and the number 1 ranked team in Washington, D.C.
Looks like we're losing a little bit. Okay, there we go, Chuck.
Then when I got back, I was able to watch.
Okay, we're having a little bit of technical difficulties.
Chuck, you may want to go out and come back in again.
Yeah, got a little bit of a freeze with Chuck Snowden. Let's take Chuck out just for a second, and Chuck, go out and go back in. Let's see if we can get you.
And what did Mike
get you speaking a little bit better? Let's see if we got you. All right. But Larry, while we wait for Chuck to come back in, your thoughts just about some of the rest of the NBA All-Star Weekend. It was played in Salt Lake City. Salt Lake has a nice basketball tradition. I remember the Utah Stars and the ABA. The Utah Jazz have been very popular there, sellouts most of the time. The All-Star Weekend is really a celebration of NBA basketball and the stars. NBA promotes stardom. Larry, your thoughts on that?
I mean, I guess if that's their goal, I'm really tired that they have so many days off. I'm ready for them to start playing again. But, the slam dunk contest, McClung, the guy that formerly went to Georgetown, I was happy for him. But I wish more of the stars would have competed in the slam dunk contest. At one time, that's what really made it interesting. We have people like Ja Morant who won't do it. I guess LeBron James started it by not doing it because I used to want him to do it when he was younger. So I would like to see more stars participate in the slam dunk contest. Now, my favorite
would be
one 3-point shot, so I was okay with that.
Yeah, it would be nice to see more of the stars, but I think part of the problem is that the stars are not as good at dunkers as some of these YouTubers. And these guys have been practicing, and that's all they seem to do. And we've actually, unfortunately, and fortunately, I have seen just about every kind of crazy dunk possible. And maybe the stars are a little afraid to showcase something that's already been seen on YouTube by guys who are not NBA quality. Do you think that's part of it, Larry?
And I really think it's just not cool. I was saying LeBron James was one of the people that I used to want to see in a slam dunk contest. He decided not to do it. I don't know if he's ever participated. And it seems like that's started a trend. I'm not going to totally blame it on him. But you have people like Ja Morant, Anthony Williams that were there. They were guys that made the All-Star team that I think would have certainly put on a good show, and people would have liked to have seen them compete, particularly Ja Morant. I mean, there's plenty of other guys there that could dunk. I just think it takes a little something away from it.
Yeah, but at the same time, there's an opportunity, and hopefully we can get Chuck involved in that. Chuck, talk about your thoughts about the NBA Slam Dunk Contest, and then we'll talk about the three-pointer. Are you with us? We got you? Okay, we still got him a little frozen up. I don't know what the technical difficulties is, and to our fans there, I will apologize for any technical difficulties that you might be experiencing watching us. Okay, just keep talking, Chuck, and we'll get you visually.
I'm sorry, I don't know what I'm sorry if I'm having a problem. I don't know what the problem is on my end.
But we're hearing you now.
You're doing fine.
So sorry about that.
You're doing fine.
Okay, good. What was the question? I don't know what the question was.
Just talking about the slam dunk contest and the lack of stars participating.
Okay. I tell you what, that McClung, I looked him up a little bit. Of course, he has high school tapes of slam dunks that he did in the All-Star game that will wow you. This kid is 6'2", and he's from a little town called Gate City, Virginia, which is 5 miles from the Tennessee border down in Southern Virginia. And I thought he put on a good show. And I'll tell you another thing about him that I in the dunk contest was he did those dunks on the first try.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me looked even more and more impressive to do those things on the first try. So kudos to him. And there were other people who performed well in the dunk contest, but the kid stole the show.
I was impressed with him, and I think maybe his YouTube and other video experience helped him and gave him the confidence to get it down. And you make a point about the fact that he got him on the first try. One of the things that has really hurt the NBA Slam Dunk Contest is how many misses they actually allow. I'm so glad that this time we didn't see it. I did watch the Slam Dunk Contest. What about the three-point shot? The three-point contest, not bad. Larry, your thoughts on the three-point contest?
Oh, I thought that was pretty good. You had a returning champion, Buddy Hield, out there, and you had one of the premier sharpshooters out there, Damian Lillard. Now, we got Halliburton did well too. Very entertaining to me. Very entertaining. But
now, one thing I will point out: Halliburton and Buddy Hield are Indiana Pacers, and they were finalists in the contest. Chuck, your thoughts?
Look, I enjoyed it, and Dame won that thing, and good for him. But I always, in my mind, when I get to the three-point shooting contest, I'll just remember the words of Mr. Larry Joe Bird, who would walk into those locker rooms with all of those great star players, all those great shooters. He'll walk in that locker room and go, "Who's going to win second place?" And he would do it every year because he, in fact, would win those three-point shooting contests. Pretty impressive. But yes, I enjoyed I didn't see all of the three-point shooting contests, but I did see some of it, and Dame did a good job.
Shout out to my boy Reggie Sanders, also a DC native. He remembers the days of watching the NBA All-Star Game, as we all do. I think all of us, it's hard to watch the game. By the way, 184 to 175. Incredible number of points, which means there was no defense whatsoever.
Tatum had 55 points and Mitchell had 40, and they were both on the same team.
That's almost too much. Yeah, it's almost too much. But, the fact is, it's still a showcase for the NBA. And if you can do a showcase in Salt Lake City, Utah, and pull it off in a town that loves the NBA, then you're doing something right. Let's talk a little bit about the NBA season, moving closer to the playoffs. We've got about 20, 25 games left in the regular season. And Chuck, your thoughts about where the NBA is going this season and who are the lead teams? Can you rank maybe the top 4 teams
Well, I think in
this
the
season?
I think in the East, it's pretty simple. I think it's Boston, Milwaukee, Cleveland, Philadelphia. I think those are the 4, with Milwaukee and Boston really being the top 2. So I think the East is we know who the top of the food chain is. What's interesting is out West, when the 3rd team and the 13th team are separated by 6 games. So there's between 3 and 13, there's a lot of jumbleness with 22 to 23 games left. It's going to be interesting to see how that all shakes itself out. For example, Golden State Warriors, who won the title last year, are 29 and 29. And they are in like 10th place or 12th place or something like that. So it's going to be an interesting finish out West, I think.
Now, Larry, you watch a lot of the NBA games. I know you got the NBA package and you get to see almost all the teams all the time. What are you noticing and what do you expect with these last 20, 25 games?
I'm really interested in, a number of things. I want to see what Brooklyn does because right now they're probably around a 4th place, I'm guessing, 4th or 5th.
They are.
And their team is really not that bad. I thought they had kind of an up-and-coming team before they traded all their players away. And actually, when they made these trades with Durant, especially with Durant, they got quite a bit back. They're almost back to where they were. They need a superstar now to get them over the hump. So I don't expect them to go that far. But at one time, I thought they would go ahead and drop out of the race. And I think they'll probably still make the playoffs. It might not even be in the play-in round. But at the top 3 teams, Philadelphia, Boston, Milwaukee. I thought Milwaukee was going to overtake Boston. They got a 12-game winning streak, but Giannis got hurt in the last game before the All-Star break, and he's going to be out for a few games, maybe a couple of weeks, and I think that's going to hurt them. I think Boston might go ahead and pass them.
Without Giannis, Milwaukee can struggle just a bit. He's arguably the best player, as I would think, in the world.
And I'm not sure Middleton's 100% either.
But at least he's back. He's back.
But he still hasn't been the same in almost a year.
Right. That's going to hurt them. In the West, interesting. I think Phoenix with the trade, certainly up there. Their expectations, I have high expectations from them, provided Durant can fully be healthy. And Booker, he just came back right before the break.
Yeah,
I expect Denver to keep going and finish in the top 2. Teams in 3rd and 4th are interesting to me. That's Sacramento and the Clippers. Both of those teams have feasted on teams under 500, but they've both been horrible on teams above 500. Clippers have the toughest schedule with teams based on their record, and Sacramento has the 2nd toughest schedule. So I don't know if they'll stay there, particularly Sacramento, but we'll see.
Before I get to Chuck and his feedback on the NBA and where it is, Russell Westbrook, they traded him out to Utah. He got bought out, and he's going to play with the Clippers. Is that a positive for the Clippers?
He's going to play with the Bulls.
Oh, I thought he signed with the Clippers.
No, he signed with Clippers. He's going to the Clippers. Well, your thoughts, Chuck, if indeed Russell Westbrook goes to the Clippers, does that make the Clippers better, or is Russell Westbrook just a guy who is fading out with his career. He did average 18 points with the Lakers.
Yeah,
16 points.
No,
with the
you're right. He did go to the Clippers because it's Pat Beverly that went to the Chicago Bulls.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, you're right. Westbrook did go to the Clippers, and I think he could perhaps, with the incentive of the fact that the Lakers didn't really want him, it gives him a little bit more to play for. And I think Ty Lue is the best coach in the West. I really like Ty Lue a lot. It's, again, that team still has to come down to, can Kawhi be healthy? Can Paul George be healthy throughout the rest of the next 22, 23 games? It really comes down to that. But I think he will help them. I do.
Well, let me pick up on that point, Chuck, and elaborate a little bit. You mentioned Ty Lue, and you've been a Ty Lue fan for several years now. What is it about his coaching acumen, what he does to motivate players that you really appreciate? And then I'll ask Larry the same thing. Okay, another technical glitch there. Keep talking, Chuck, if you can. Let me go to Larry, and hopefully we'll get you back. Oh, go ahead if you can.
I think he's underappreciated. I think Ty is really, 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 really good. And I was computer today.
All right, Larry, pick up from there, and hopefully Chuck, we can get him back in fluid motion in just a second.
He's back now.
Okay, go ahead, Chuck.
Yeah, so I just think strategically, tactically, the relationships and communications with his team, the way he plugs and plays, he knows his team well, defensively and offensively. I just think he pushes all the right buttons, and they respond for him, except for Kawhi and Paul George have not played many games for him this year. But when they're on the floor, I think he knows what he's doing.
Now, he is certainly Ty Lue. That's who we're talking about.
Sure.
And I'd like you to elaborate, Larry. Ty Lue, when he won the NBA title, when he was coaching the Cleveland Cavaliers, it seemed like it was more LeBron's victory than Ty Lue's coaching expertise. But it over time, I think people actually seeing what Ty Lue can do and help players. Larry, do you agree with that?
I guess that's right. I haven't really analyzed him that closely. I mean, I think as Chuck touched on it, he seems like he knows strategy, and he seems like he deals with relationships very well, and he gets the most out of the players. And, I think a lot of times if you get good players and can deal with them, you become a great coach. Ask Phil Jackson.
Yeah.
Let's talk about another coach, a transaction that happened, I believe it was today. Nate McMillan, formerly coached a number of teams, Seattle, Portland, Indiana, Pacers. Atlanta. He got fired by the Hawks. He's had a pretty decent overall career, and also it demonstrates that the NBA will retread coaches, and he's had a pretty good record. I was talking to a friend of mine, and I'd say Trae Young. Who can contain that guy? What coach can really coach a player like that? And is it Trae Young's fault that Nate McMillan's not there? Larry, your thoughts?
Well, just when they hired Nate McMillan, I guess that was 2 seasons ago, he convinced Trae Young to share the ball, and it seemed like the team turned around at that point. So at that point, at least, he seemed to be doing a good job. I reached out to a friend of mine down in Atlanta, and she told me, she said, well, there's been a few problems lately. Apparently they lost a game to Charlotte, but at the end when they needed a shot and they had Trae Young inbounding the ball. Somebody named AJ, she said they pulled him too early. This friend of mine, she's really into it. So what I got from her was a few things recently that drew a lot of ire. And I think Trae Young inbounding the ball at the crucial time might have been what pushed him over the edge. So I don't know. I don't know what's going on down there. I was kind of surprised.
Chuck, what do you think? I'm just not a Trae Young
I wasn't
guy.
surprised. I'm not sure I'm a McMillan guy. Look, I saw. I think they've been talking about this happening for a couple of months now, or a month or so now, because him and Trey didn't seem like they were getting along. Look, in the offseason, they signed Trey, they signed Collins, they signed one of their shooters. They spent a lot of money. They pulled out their checkbook, and that team is 29 or 28 and 29. Like they're below 500, and they had a pretty good run. I think that was 2 years ago in the playoffs, and it just hasn't worked since then. So somebody has to be the scapegoat. They can't fire the players, right? You know how that goes. And I think he became the victim. And again, he has been traded, he's been cut by a lot of teams over his career.
In fairness to him, I think he overachieved that year that they made that run in the playoffs.
Maybe.
And people started expecting that. But they did, you're right, they signed Murray, right? From
the kid from San Antonio. They made a deal to get him. They signed Trey. They gave him a big contract. And again, John Collins. And I don't think they know what to do with Collins after they've given him all that money. So there were some problems down in Atlanta.
Any other surprises that, we might see? And I'll ask you guys before we wrap up the NBA discussion, that we might see before the end of the regular season. I know always the talk is about the Lakers, and I'm going to start with you, Chuck. You're this patron saint of the Lakers. Will they make the playoffs this year, and how important is it to LeBron for them to make the playoffs?
I think it's very important to him. In fact, I saw a report recently that said these next 22, 23 games are some of the most important 22, 23 games of his career, which is pretty heavy. So I think, again, David, and I know you agree with this, if Anthony Davis, which he doesn't have a history of doing this,
street clothes,
Anthony Davis can stay healthy, and if LeBron can stay healthy, I do believe the pickup of D'Angelo Russell and Mamba, the center from Orlando, and they also picked up another kid from Minnesota. And then they got Rua right before the trade as well from the Wizards. I think these pieces would help. I just don't know if they have enough time to overcome all. How bad are the Lakers this year? The Rockets and who's the other team? And the Spurs are the only two teams that are worse than the Lakers in the West. The Rockets and the Spurs. So there are three teams from the bottom. Come on, man.
Yeah, but what's really wrong with the Lakers, Larry? Is it over dependence on LeBron? Is it too much attention on the team? Or is it just natural attrition and we're just focusing on the Lakers because they are the Lakers?
What's wrong with them? I think early on they just weren't that good. And a big part of them not being that good is player availability. They don't play. LeBron takes days off, like load management. Anthony Davis takes days off and is hurt all the time. You can't win without your stars out there. And I don't really think they were that good. Now, right now, they seem to have a lot of good players. The bad news is there's two teams between them and the final playoff spot, So essentially they got to pass three teams, which doesn't seem like a lot, but passing three teams is sometimes could be a challenge. The other thing is they have 9 new players since they started trading people. And it takes a while for players to mesh. Maybe hopefully it won't take them 20 games. But
all these games are tough.
They're good.
They play Golden State tomorrow night, and both those games are important to both those teams. So we'll kind of get an indication tomorrow night how this thing might play out. 22, 23 games aren't a lot.
Before we leave the NBA, last question. Who is in the lead for the MVP? Is it still Nikola Jokic and Giannis, or is Jason Tatum? Should he figure in because Boston looks like right now maybe the best team overall in the NBA? Larry.
Matter of personal preference, and I would throw Embiid in there too.
Okay.
If it's a regular season award, any of those guys could win.
Chuck.
I think it's Joker, Embiid, Giannis. Joker, Embiid, Giannis right now. And I think that's how it's going to end up. Which means Joker will have won 3 in a row.
3 in a row. Right now, I would say he might be in the lead, but I still kind of figure Jason Tatum is going to get votes. I think he's going to get significant votes this time that he hasn't gotten because Boston looks so strong. And by the way, Boston's interim coach signed a full-time contract.
Sure did.
And it kind of makes you wonder, the players really didn't need the other guy.
Yeah.
And I hate to be dismissive of him, but Boston had a lot of talent. Got a lot of talent and like to play well together. Let's talk a little college basketball. We are less than a month away from the start of March Madness and everybody's bracket and bracketology. Let's take a look at maybe some of the top 4 schools, the top seeds that will come out in just a couple of weeks. Let me start with you, Larry. Who are the top 4 teams in your mind in college basketball right now?
I can't intelligently address that for a number of reasons. Number one, I don't watch that many college games, but when I do watch them, it seems like the number 1 team who's ever voted number 1 loses. So it really seems like regular season madness this year. So which makes for a real interesting March Madness.
Now, is it parity, Chuck, in college basketball? Is there more parity than we've ever seen, perhaps? And maybe the change in the rules transfer portal and all of that?
I do think all of that is part of this. For example, Houston's the number 1 team right now. And I don't know. I mean, do they have a McDonald's All-American on that team? Do they have a guy who's going to leave that team and go to the pros? I don't know. And typically that's what happens. You know, normally these good teams have several guys that go to the pros. But Houston, Alabama, Kansas, UCLA, and Purdue are the top 5 teams. This week, and like Larry said, it could change next week. I'll tell you what.
It definitely can change.
I'll tell you what's interesting in college basketball right now, and maybe I shouldn't go here, but I will, is Alabama had a guy from the D.C. area who was involved in a shooting, killed someone. And, of course, that guy who was on the team, he's in jail. And we found out 2 days ago that he got the gun from Alabama's star player. And Alabama's star player is still playing.
You know, there's a lot of questions about that. If he, in fact, handed over the gun to the player who actually shot and killed someone, he shouldn't be playing.
Oh.
And, you know, I think if it was Alabama football, probably more would be done. But, in a football school, the basketball team sometimes kind of goes under the radar. Something should be done there. Let's go back.
Keep in mind on that. In some states, carrying guns, people look at it differently. I think here, at least in the Northeast, and David, you've lived here for a while, very different attitude. When I've traveled down south on business, no big deal. Matter of fact, you can just go to Virginia and you'll see people
packing, right? You can carry in Virginia.
And I think the fact that someone has a gun, they look at it differently.
Well, they have here in Indianapolis and Indiana, concealed carry is now legal here in Indiana. So, things are changing. But if you hand the gun that actually did the damage to another guy, there's going to be some questions. And I think in Alabama ought to do something. But let me go back. We talked about Houston, which is now ranked again at number 1.
Yeah.
And Chuck, for you, the coach of Houston, Kelvin Sampson
was the IU coach.
He gets so, they crucify him here in Indiana. And I think it's such unfortunate criticism of Kelvin Sampson. For now multiple years, he's led Houston. Before he went to Indiana, he was at Oklahoma. And all of his infractions are now considered non-infractions anymore in college basketball. Right. What kind of a coach is Kelvin Sampson?
He's a hell of a coach. He is a hell of a coach. And again, he's doing this thing. They just play hard. They don't shoot the ball particularly well, but they go to that offensive glass. They play tenacious defense. They're tough-minded. He goes after those kids. He does not hold any punches, and they just play tough. And yet, he's right there. And guess where the Final Four is this year? Houston.
It's in Houston. Wouldn't it be something if Houston
Wouldn't it be?
Could win at home?
Mm-hmm.
That would be interesting.
That would be so cool.
But again, I just think Kelvin Sampson is just kind of taking a beating. Top 4 teams in my estimation: Houston, Kansas, UCLA, and Purdue. Is there a best player in college basketball this year, Larry? Is there anybody that you follow?
No, I haven't seen anybody that's. I guess out of the limited games I've seen, the guy in Indiana is pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if he's the best
Both of
player.
them.
Well, I'm talking about the big guy.
Right.
I don't know if he's the best player. I mean, he seems to be a pretty decent player. And I will say, if he's the best player, the nation's in trouble. I don't see him going to the pros and just chewing everybody up. But he's a very solid player.
Well, he's a solid player, who probably, if his skills were considered a little bit higher, he probably would have already been in the NBA. And, his dad, Dale Davis, who played for the Pacers. He's not quite his father, but he is a pretty good player. The player I think who probably still has a leg up on Player of the Year, who I thought was lurch and terrible, who's improved, is Zach Edey from Purdue, who's averaging a double-double, 20-some points a game, multiple block shots and double-digit rebounds, and multiple blocks a game. Now he's 7'4". That helps. That makes a difference. But I think those two guys from the state of Indiana look like maybe 1 and 2 for Player of the Year. But Player of the Year doesn't mean anything because the kid from Kentucky was Player of the Year, and he was not NBA ready. And that's Shibwa,
Oscar
Shibwa, who may never be a top flight player in the NBA. So you never know. Let's get away from college basketball. Let's talk about something that is near and dear to particularly you, Larry, and Chuck, being in the nation's capital. Eric Bieniemy, who signed as offensive coordinator with the Washington Commanders, formerly the Washington Redskins. Is this a good move for Bieniemy or a bad move, or maybe a little bit of both? Let me start with you, Chuck.
What an interesting subject. So for the Washington Commanders, I am a Washington Commander fan. It's a good move. I like the move. I applaud it. It's just an interesting decision by him, right? Because we have a quarterback who's played one game in Sam Howell, and they say that he is going to be probably the starter next year. There's no Patrick Mahomes here, right? We have great receivers or very good receivers. For us, I think it's a good move. For him, I don't know. Let's say we sell the team in 2 months because there's a lot of that chatter is going on that we're getting ready to sell a team. The new owner may fire everybody, right, and bring in the coaches that they want. So for him, I don't know. But for us, a Commander fan, I'm 100% okay with it.
Larry, good or bad move for Eric Bieniemy to be signed on as the offensive coordinator for the Commanders?
I think what Chuck said, it depends on whose perspective you're looking at. I think for Washington, he's an upgrade from the Turner, the guy that they had. I would love to hear why he said he signed with Washington.
Right.
I haven't heard him really discuss that much. But maybe he felt like he needed a change. So maybe this is a change he needed.
The one thing about Eric Bieniemy, he was grossly underappreciated and in Kansas City. No one thought he did much of anything. And in fact, a former player who played for the Chiefs, LaShawn Shady McCoy, really kind of blasted Eric Bieniemy and said he really wasn't involved very much at all in the offensive sets and development during the week for the Kansas City Chiefs. Is that a valid criticism or not? Or is that just Shady McCoy spouting off? Larry, what do you think?
Well, I'll give you a background. I was a supervisor for like 20 years. I'd like to think that from some of my peers and other people, I did a good job. But I think if you talk to everybody that worked for me, there might be one or two that might have something negative to say. I haven't really heard a whole lot of people saying one thing or the other about Bieniemy, and apparently his boss liked him. So I'll take, Shady has an opinion. He's entitled to it.
Chuck, your thoughts.
Some people came back over the top of those comments by McCoy, and I heard those comments, and I read those as well, David. They backed up Bieniemy, and they said he was doing a good job, and they don't know why Shady was saying this, and that wasn't true, and blah 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 blah. You said it in the production meeting, David. I find the whole subject fascinating because clearly there's something, right? And there's something, and I don't know. Maybe we'll never know. But there is something more interesting about this particular coach in this particular circumstance than to me meets the eye, because ain't no way you can be the 4 Super Bowls, won 2 of them, and you're not getting an opportunity to be a head coach, or you have to settle to be the offensive coordinator with the Washington Commanders. Come on.
I think, and the real issue is not so much Eric Bieniemy becoming the offensive coordinator for the Commanders. It still becomes this ongoing discussion over the last number of years about why Eric Bieniemy can't get a head job.
Right.
Other offensive coordinators who have worked under Andy Reid have gotten an opportunity. I don't know, but I think maybe one of the questions, we'll have to look at and examine will be, what does Eric Bieniemy have to do to make himself sellable as a head coach? Because the move to the Commanders is clearly an effort to get out from under the shadow of Andy Reid. And what would it take for Eric Bieniemy to become seen as a hot candidate as a head coach, whether for the Commanders or whether for some other team? And Chuck, let me start with you.
Well, I think he has to put together a good offense next year. That quarterback, he has to develop him. If that's who's going to start, the rookie Sam Howell, and the receivers, he got to get those guys, and we pay a lot of money for those receivers, and get those guys involved in the offense. And our offense has to look good. I mean, they do. And if it doesn't, I don't know. But I think if we can get that offense going and we're winning some games, I think that's going to help Eric. And I think the reverse is not going to help him. And I'll tell you another thing about that. Suppose Kansas City wins another Super Bowl and he's not there. Will that help him either? So
you never know.
I know he's got some challenges ahead of him. The people who, I think he's got some challenges ahead of him. Bless his heart.
Larry, what does Eric Bieniemy, in your mind, need to do to prove himself? Because he's in the unfortunate position of having to prove that he can be an offensive wizard and ultimately a head coach. What do you see that he needs? You, particularly as a season ticket holder, longtime fan of the Commanders, what would you like to see him do?
You guys heard me mention before, I think his lack of being hired has nothing to do with his performance as offensive coordinator. And sometimes, I heard in the last 2.5 years, he's been interviewed 15 times. Sometimes when you go on that many interviews and it's public, some people's like, well, you didn't hire him, I may not hire him. Some people really like that, and he might be faced with that. So to answer your question, I'm not sure what he can do.
Right.
If he turns Washington around, I think Washington was like number 20 in offense. If they rise significantly, I think it'll be great. I think, like Chuck said, the quarterback situation is very questionable there, and it's kind of hard to do that without a good quarterback. But I'm not sure what he can do. I don't think he really has to prove himself as a offensive coordinator. I think his record speaks for itself. I think it's being.
And I would agree with both of you in that case. But what I would like to see myself with Eric Bieniemy is the media give him some props. he will have the camera on him, even though he's not the head coach with the Commanders. He will be focused on, the cameras will be on him. They will see the interaction that he will have with players. In Kansas City, even though he was the offensive coordinator, the interaction with the quarterback, Mahomes, was always with Andy Reid. You never saw the camera focus on, and sometimes what the commentators talk about, it's Andy Reid's, understanding of the game. You never heard what they thought of what Eric Bieniemy added to the Kansas City offense, what he added to that team. This time he'll have no excuses. He'll be right out there. He'll be seen. Ron Rivera is not going to get all the attention. He's defensive minded. I hate the whole defensive minded, offensive minded debate. But that said, the camera's going to be focused on Eric Bieniemy, and I hope he will rise to the challenge. I hope we can see him engaged and focused, and I hope the Commanders do well offensively, because I want to see this man get a head coaching job. Last thing on Eric Bieniemy. Does race have any factor in what's happened to him, looking at the NFL's problem in hiring African-American head coaches? Does race have anything to do with it, Larry?
I would suspect for some people it does. But again, I want to talk about what you're talking about, the media. I think the media has done its job. I mean, they've brought that to everyone's attention. He's no secret. Somebody just needs to give him a chance. And for some reason, his record, that should stand for itself. For some reason, his record is being ignored. So race could be part of it with some people. I think when you get a large enough group, you're going to have certain people that have hangups about race. But I just don't get it. I don't know what it is, but it has. I will say it doesn't have anything to do with his performance.
Chuck, your thoughts?
I just think it's
a factor.
And again, I could be naive, right? I could be. I don't think in this case it's race. And what I mean by that is I just believe there's something that we don't know. And I don't know what that could be. Maybe he interviews really, 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 really bad. But even if he interviews really, really, really bad, his record speaks for itself. And other dudes get these positions. Matt Nagy, he was the offensive coordinator in Kansas City. He sure got the Chicago Bears job, did a terrible job, and he didn't call plays and so forth and so on. So I don't know if it's, as Larry says, I don't think it's his record. I don't think it's race in this case. But I do think there's something, and I just don't know what it is. I did read somewhere. I don't know if I should put this out here like this, where back in his past, once upon a time, he literally choked a female parking attendant. Now,
and we've heard all of that.
All
and
that stuff.
That may be a factor. Keep in mind, it wasn't a factor in Kansas City.
I agree.
No one ever used that against him in Kansas City. And
he wasn't charged with that. That it went away or something. I don't even know if it really. I just read something about it.
I think all of us are kind of wondering
baffled.
What could it be. And sometimes you have to also keep in mind the head coach of a team is also the leader in terms of the visibility of a team. Essentially the PR spokesperson for a team, over and above just coaching players. You are a representative. You are the face of the franchise outside of the quarterback. And maybe for some, they don't see him in that role. Personally, I'd like to see him dress up a little bit better. I hope he'll come across a little bit better with the Commanders, because those external factors, which theoretically shouldn't matter, he's going to have to do something. And I'm hoping really hard. I'm praying for him. Anyway, before we sign off, let me ask you, and I'll start with you, Chuck. The Indiana Hoosiers women's basketball team sold out Assembly Hall down in Bloomington. Sold out 17,000
on Sunday. Yep, biggest
They're
turnout.
number 2 in the country only lost one game.
Michigan State.
Are they capable of knocking off South Carolina Gamecocks, Lady Gamecocks under Dawn Staley, which is the #1 ladies team in the country?
Well, I watched that game, and I've been proud of those ladies all year long. They did beat Purdue. They have now won the Big Ten title. If, in other words, even if there's another
Iowa.
even if they went all and they lost to Maryland,
Right.
so that means Indiana is going to be the undisputed champ of the Big Ten. They're really, really good. This Grace Berger and this Mackenzie Holmes, she's the center. They're tough. They're really, really, really good. They got a lot of balance. So can they beat Dawn Staley in South Carolina? As they say, on any given Sunday, maybe a fighter's chance, because that South Carolina team is really, really good. But I would love to see the finals between Indiana and South Carolina in the final two, and then take their chances.
Larry,
They're really
thoughts
good.
on the ladies basketball?
Haven't seen a lot of it. I've seen Maryland a couple of times. I've seen South Carolina play, and I remember seeing them play. I guess it was Super Bowl Sunday when they played LSU.
Yes, and they
Probably
crushed
ranked
them.
`5 or something like that.
3. They were ranked 3.
Yeah, I think they're like #5 now.
Oh, now, yes,
Yeah,
right.
and they mopped the floor with them. Of course, the game was a home game for them, and
Right.
they had a lot going on. But they look like a good team. I've seen them play like 3 times. Again, it's hard to tell when people vote for who's the best. So I don't know the quality of their opponents, but if the voting is anything close to accurate, they look tough. Have not seen Indiana play.
Yeah.
One thing that just kind of sticks out about ladies basketball, ironically, look at Dawn Staley. She makes $3.5 million a year. No WNBA coach makes anywhere close to that amount of money. In fact, maybe the whole South Carolina team, which won the national championship last season, they probably are doing pretty well with NIL. I would hope they are. And they might be making more than with South Carolina than they would make with the WNBA. And that's kind of ironic. I'm hoping the, ladies basketball at the professional level will get better. We do know a lot of the players won't be going to Russia to get any money in the near future. Anyway, gentlemen.
South Carolina's best player, Aaliyah Boston. She was the player of the year last year.
Player of the year, the center.
And she's doing really, really great this year too. So I think the odds are in favor to win this whole thing. But we'll see what happens if IU gets to play them in the finals or somewhere along the way.
All right, guys. Any closing remarks before we sign off? Larry, I'll start with you. You got any?
I have one. This is a non-basketball related one, but I think it's important, particularly at the end of Black History Month. A couple of days ago, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority, aka the Ladies of Green and Pink, started a federal credit union for their members, and their goal is to help Black women pursue generational wealth. So my hat goes off to my sisters, and I'm very proud of them for taking that step. That's the type of thing we need to do.
I'm so glad I don't have one, David, but I'm so glad you mentioned that, Larry. I have actually 2 AKAs that live in my house. One is my wife and one is my daughter. And they mentioned that to me this week.
I come from an AKA family. My late mother, AKA 2 of my sisters, AKAs, my aunts, an AKA, my cousins, an AKA. And guess what? I'm an Alpha Phi Alpha.
Hello.
Anyway, gentlemen, it's been real. It's been real fun as usual, and that's going to conclude it. We will be back next Wednesday with Real Fellas.